This happened in college maybe 7 years ago. At the time, I was living with one of my best friends, and we were very into the bar scene and partying and such. We lived in a city that was very much inundated with college kids, so it was never hard to find a party. And I'm ashamed to admit it, but probably every other night I was out partying. So this story starts on a night very much like every other. My friend and I got all dressed up and went on a bar crawl, and we ended up at this club. It was one of the more popular ones in the area, and we met up with my ex-roommate. The three of us were having a great night, but periodically we were all interacting with this one guy. None of us can remember his name, but he seemed normal enough. He sat next to us on the smoking porch and bummed a cig from me. Then he bought my friend a drink, and he was dancing next to us. We even had a little flippant conversation together, although I can't for the life of me remember what it was about. But he was there, in the periphery, all night. At around 1 a.m, the three of us decided that we were drunk enough and done dancing, so my ex-roommate invited me and my best friend to her place to smoke some weed. None of us had cars at this point, but it's a nice night and she only lives a couple of miles away, so we started walking. The downtown streets quickly turned into a semi-residential, semi-warehouse district area. Not the best part of town, or the most populated, but not a bad area by any means, and usually the streets are empty. We're maybe about halfway to our destination, when we noticed there's someone behind us, trailing along and getting closer. We really don't think anything of it, until we pause to light up some cigarettes, and he catches us up. Suddenly we realize it's the guy who'd been hanging around us at the bar. He's kind of stumbling and clearly drunk. He greets us like old friends, so we don't want to be rude. It strikes all of us as weird that he's here to begin with, but we shrug it off because he's drunk and seemingly harmless. I should say right now that he's a real scrawny guy, on the taller side, but thin with a baby face and big, big eyes. He just looks generally harmless and drunk. He asks if he can bum a smoke and walk with us until he gets to where he's going, which isn't far. He's just drunk, we think, and he's not sure he'll make it. He's clearly very unsteady on his feet, so we say sure, why not? So we're walking and chatting, and we're getting closer to our destination, but he doesn't make any indication of where he's going, so I finally ask him, "Where do you live anyway?" He then gives me this funny look, like I'd asked something really stupid, and says, "Oh, I don't live anywhere near here." This kind of creeps us all out, and we sort of stop where we were to say, "Okay, well, then where are you going?" "Oh, I'm following you," he says. At this point, I think there's been a big misunderstanding in his mind, so I respond with something along the lines of, "Okay, well, no offense, but we don't even know your name. You're not coming with us." His face changed into this look of hurt, anger, and it was also a little bit manic. He then becomes loud and says, "But I told you all my name. I told each of you my name. How do none of you remember my name?" At this point, my ex-roomie steps in and says, "Look man, I know you're drunk, but you need to calm down." He became calm really fast, then got this really serious look and said, No, I'm not drunk, I'm fine. I just knew you'd trust me more if you thought I was." At that point, I'm like, hell no, I'm out. But my roomie doesn't believe him, and she says something like, "No, you've been stumbling this whole time. Of course you're drunk." He shakes his head, and in a completely calm tone, with no slurring whatsoever, he says, "No, I'm sober. I just wanted to see if you'd let me in the house." "Why?" my friend asked. And with a great big smile, and his big eyes even wider, he says, "I just wanted to see how close I could get to killing you." I'd had enough of this now, and I put on my authoritative voice, telling him that that is enough. We're leaving and he needs to go in the other direction before I call the cops. He just shrugs and says, "Fine." and we scurry away and leave him leaning up against a stop sign, smoking a cigarette and watching us as we walk away. As soon as we get round the corner, we all break into a dead sprint and run for a few blocks. When we come to a spot, we completely freak out. We're in the middle of a panic whisper huddle when my friend looks over my shoulder and lets out a little scream. We turn around and there he is. It's dark, so we can't really see his face, just his silhouette against the street lamps. But that was enough to know it was definitely him. He's striding down the road a few blocks away, hands in his pockets, not a trace of a stumble, and he's not exactly running, but he's walking at this real brisk pace. He'd be on us in less than a minute. Luckily, we're only about a block away from my friend's place, so we start booking it there. We're almost at the front door when I realize suddenly that we don't want him to know where we're going. Not the three of us alone. That seems dangerous as hell. Fortune shines on us though, as up the block I can see the telltale signs of a garage party, so we book it over there instead. We come up to the lawn and there's a bunch of dudes out front, and we're breathlessly trying to explain ourselves, but when we turn around to point out the guy, he's nowhere to be seen. The partiers sympathize and let us hang out for a few hours, and a few of them even walked us back to the house. Thankfully, we never saw that dude again, but needless to say, my friends and I lost our taste for partying for quite a while after that. So this happened about 2.5 years ago, and since it did, I've blocked it out, because it was honestly the scariest thing ever. One night, at about 11 p.m, my best friend and I were driving around town, just taking random turns with no real destination, when we were at a stop sign, waiting for a truck to pass so we could go. The truck passed and we pulled out, turning left, making us then directly behind it. The truck then pulled off to the right and in front of a church. The church was on the block, with 2 houses next to it, and my friend and I continued to drive, thinking nothing of it. So we were about to pass the church, when the truck pulled back out onto the road. We thought it was a little weird, but we just ignored it. We stopped at the next stop sign, then turned right. So did the truck. The weird feeling was intensifying now, and at the next stop sign we went straight on. At the next block we turned right, went up the block, then turned right again. The truck was still directly behind us. We kept driving straight and down the road just before turning right again, back onto the block where the church was. He had now taken the 3 same turns that we had, in almost a full circle. We decided to take one more right to make a circle, and there he was, right behind us. At this point, my friend and I are completely freaking out. As soon as we'd passed the church once again, my friend hit the gas and we blew through the stop sign, this time turning left instead of right. We were about 3 blocks from the main road, and we blew every stop sign, trying to get away from this guy, but he was still there. Nobody was on the roads at this point in the night, so as we'd finally gotten to the main road, we didn't stop at the stop sign and turned left, hitting the gas. We were going 80 on a 55 road, and looking behind us there was the truck. We were almost in tears now. My friend then took a right onto a road that led to a small neighborhood. Now we could have turned left or right, but without thinking clearly we just hurriedly took a quick left onto a road that had about 4 houses on it. Unfortunately though, that road continued to loop left and back to the main road again. When we realized this, we stopped, and looking left back onto the main road, lo and behold, the truck was driving slowly up towards where we were. It then pulled off the main road and shut all its lights off, just sitting there in the dark. It occurred to us that he knew there was only one way out. He was waiting for us to come up that road. We turned off our lights too, then hurriedly turned around and drove straight, weaving through all the houses and coming out of the neighborhood on the other side. As we got to the other side, we got on the other main road that headed north, because while he was following us, we were heading south. Eventually we came to Walmart, where she was going to park it anyway, then we'd head to our homes. Once parked up, we both burst into tears before we got out and said our goodbyes. Now I live around half an hour from this parking lot, and she was only 10 minutes from her house. I was so terrified I would see that truck again. We don't talk about it much, as the fear that we felt was so weird. I haven't felt anything like that since. We don't know why the truck started following us, and we probably never will. But these days we never know what goes through a sick person's head when they see two 16-year-old girls driving around at 11 o'clock at night. So I recently heard about this thread and thought I'd share something that has always stuck with my friend and I. I worked at a beauty store in Texas that sold hair, makeup, or nail-related products. I had a lot of regulars, so the fact that I saw the same person over and over was nothing new. But I did have one hairdresser that always struck up a conversation every time he was coming to stock up. The first couple of times, he'd have me follow him around and ask my opinion. But that term became a misnomer after he started only talking about my hair. I naturally have very huge, loose curls, and it upset him that I wasn't treating him right. He only ever said he was amazing with natural curls, but he never actually gave me advice. I was 19 and didn't realize that that really is a weird thing to do. Soon the visits were only conversations with him, constantly asking me to let him do my hair for free and trying to entice me. So I finally just took him up on the offer. I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, but I at least knew not to go alone or tell him I was bringing someone. I have never been good at reading situations, so I would slightly switch up on people to see any micro-expressions that hint to an ulterior motive if I don't have a good feeling. He immediately switched the meeting place as we drove there from his salon to his house, and ignoring my stabbing gut feeling, I just kept going. I remember really not wanting to go in though once we arrived. When he got to the door, his eyes instantly went to my friend, and as I thought he looked irritated, I was going to use that as a way to head out, but I didn't even think of a scenario where he would do her hair as well. I instantly was only trying to find a natural way out, as he's greeting us in. He asked us to brush our hair, and I noticed in my peripheral vision that he was adding something to our drinks when he thought we were focused on getting my hairbrush. My friend was actually texting me on her phone, so I could make something up while I reached for the brush. I set the brush down to check my text when it vibrated. He immediately tried to make us uncomfortable if we didn't take the drinks, but we didn't realize he was staring at my hair in a trance-like state. I instantly put my phone to my ear and held up a finger to his face that was closing in and now holding my hair. I started acting panicked, and my friend knew instantly that it meant time to go. I didn't even reply to any questions he asked me. I just kept up this fake conversation I was having on the phone with my mom, asking, "Is Dad okay? Are you okay? I'm leaving right now, just tell me where you are." By the time all of that was uttered, we were out the door, briskly walking down the hall to the elevator. But his door stayed open a crack, until the ding of the elevator, when he immediately slammed the door so hard we felt the vibrations. I didn't feel safe until we were in the car and driving away. We rode in stunned silence until I got to her house to drop her off, when she asked for a cigarette and to sit for a bit, trying to take in what had just happened. I don't know what he had planned, or whether it was just some actual innocent obsession with hair, and his way was just too awkward and shady, or if there was something more devious planned. We never talked about it again and stopped going to hairdressers altogether. Nowadays we'll share a knowing glance when we hear something that reminds us of that moment we were in that guy's house. All I can say is, we definitely agreed that day before parting that we did not want to meet him again. This incident happened when I was 14 years old, and I'm now 23. My dad at the time was a whitewater raft guide and would often be out of town during peak seasons, leaving me, my older sister of 7 years, and my stepmother at our home, nestled in front of the Cherokee National Forest in East Tennessee. It was later in the evening of a Friday night, and my sister and I decided that we wanted to go and get a Subway before they closed. We asked our stepmom and she said that we could. So, my sister and I got in the car and headed to Subway, which was only a couple of miles away. As we pulled out from a stop sign at an intersection, I noticed a car get behind us. I mean, that's not unusual in itself. It's just that we lived in a sleepy small town, so maybe I knew them. Anyway, I didn't think any more about it, and we arrived at Subway, which is in a shabby shopping centre where an old White's grocery store was right next door. It's now dark at this point, and a car pulled up nearby into the dark, unlit parking lot where a lot of local high schoolers hang out regularly. I quickly assumed it was just another teen hanging out, but I was wrong. We got our order and left with our food in our hands when I suddenly noticed the car's headlights flick on as we're opening our car doors. I quickly mentioned it to my sister, and she just shrugged it off. We drove away from Subway to the exit of the parking lot, and the unknown driver of this white Ford Probe floored it across the lot, even running over the curb to keep up with us. Now my sister was paying attention, as I could see she was visibly scared. Now there's multiple ways to get to our house, so we took the more intricate and confusing way to someone who doesn't know where they're going, and we were just terrified and wanted to get home as fast as possible. The vehicle kept up with us until a few turns before our neighborhood. As I mentioned before, we lived on top of a hill, and the forest was behind us, but in front of us were 3 streets forming a valley-like structure. As we'd got closer to our house, we'd since lost the guy, so we figured we were just being paranoid. We pulled up into our driveway and go inside, kind of jokingly telling our story to our stepmom. And in the midst of the story, we see headlights from a car in front of our house. My sister looked out the window. It was the white Probe. We're completely terrified at this point, because this person was either very aware of where we lived, or was just a neighbor that we didn't know. Whoever this was, though, sat outside our house for what seemed like a really long time, and before my stepmom got out her phone to call my father to ask if he has any idea to who this was, they drove off. Weird. We sat and ate our food, uncomfortably trying to shrug it off, and we see it outside again, and 4 more times until we called my father again. He wasn't sure who it could have been, but assured us we're okay, because we had firearms in the house, plus we lived in a safe neighborhood. That's all he could do through a phone call and being in Florida. Maybe it was someone who was lost, or thought they knew my sister. We couldn't figure it out. My stepmom had to work the next day, and since it was the weekend, my sister and I slept in late. We woke up at around 11 a.m. and decided to play some video games. Shortly after we'd started playing, there was a knock on our front door. We weren't expecting anyone, so we didn't answer. The knocking continued and got louder. From our living room you could see into the kitchen, and my dad, being a nature lover, had built a ceiling-to-floor window in the kitchen to sip coffee and watch the world outside. This is important for later. The knocking eventually subsided, and my sister was then trying to find her Motorola flip phone to call our stepmom and the police, and as she was doing that, we both saw this man peering into our large kitchen window. As we make eye contact with him, he turns and walks up the hill into the national forest. The police arrived several minutes later, and so did our stepmom, who was also beside herself. The police asked us if we knew who this could have been. and why whoever this was would have left a note on our door. A note on our door, I thought. We ran to the front door, and sure enough, there was one there. Reading the poorly written note that was written on a torn corner of a piece of sticky pad paper, it read, "I wasn't planning on hurting anyone." We told the officers what had happened, and that he'd gone up the hill into the forest, so they did a quick scan and said they didn't see anyone, and that we really just need to keep everything locked up for a while, be vigilant, and if we were to experience this again, to give them a call. We moved shortly after this event. I'm a 22-year-old male and was working the 7 p.m. to the 7 a.m. graveyard shift. I was posted at a library where my main task was to watch for potential trespassers, in particular an older male who kept returning to the library during the night. The library had a bolo out for him and emailed me a photo of the guy so I could easily recognize him if he showed up. Around 1 a.m. I got up from the security desk to go out on patrol. As I approached the door to go outside, I noticed 2 homeless people sitting on a bench with a large shopping cart covered by a blue tarp, and it had red stains all over it. Being generally creeped out already, I hesitated to even go outside at all. I thought about just using the on-site cell phone to call the police department, as that is what I'm supposed to do. However, I decided it wouldn't be right to call without politely letting the couple know they were trespassing first and give them an opportunity to leave without incident. It would have been less work for me too, as any time I have to call PD, I have to make an incident report. So I grabbed my flashlight and walked outside, identifying myself as security and letting the couple know that they needed to leave. They were a younger African-American couple, and neither one matched the description of the bolo suspect. The man was pacing back and forth, smoking a cigar and writing something on a notepad, and the woman was sitting down, sort of just staring into space. I asked them politely to leave, when the woman begins arguing with me about how she's homeless and how the police already told her she could stay there. I knew that was obviously a lie, and told her once again that she needed to leave. I kept trying to explain to her that she was loitering and that wasn't allowed, but she carried on arguing with me about the definition of loitering and just generally being a pain in the butt. This whole time the man said absolutely nothing and was just in his own world, continuing to pace back and forth and chain smoke. I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere by being nice, so I informed them that I would be calling the police and retreated back inside the security room to call. 10 minutes later and the couple appeared to be gone. A few moments after that, the police had arrived and I went outside to talk to them. They didn't really seem to care too much about any of it, and once they'd seen that they were gone, they just told me to call back if they returned. So I went back out on patrol, and as I was making my way around the building, I ran into the same woman from before who I'd just called the police on. But she was now by herself, and the man was nowhere in sight. She had a very odd stance and posture. It's difficult to describe, but if you've ever played any of the Silent Hill games, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Her posture was similar to the way the nurses from Silent Hill stand. I didn't say anything to her, and she didn't seem to notice me, so I went back to where the police were still parked and told them that she was still on the premises. They got out of their cars and walked with me to where she was standing and asked her to leave. She started telling them she had permission to be there and that the sheriff had told her she was allowed to be there. They told her that she wasn't, and to make a long story short, she eventually left, or so I thought. After the police had finally left, I went back inside and made a cup of coffee. It was now around 2 a.m, and I decided I wanted a little fresh air, so I stood outside and drank my coffee. Now this is where things get really creepy. Next to the library parking lot is a big park with a playground, and I started to hear what sounded like faint whispers, followed by menacing laughter. I looked over in the direction of where the noise was coming from, and I can barely manage to spot the couple. The man had returned and was standing next to the woman from earlier. They were staring at me, but because it was so dark, I could only see their silhouettes, and their eyes were literally glowing, kinda like when a person's eyes glow in a picture. The woman kept laughing while the man said in a slow, monotone voice all the different ways he could hurt me. He said it loudly enough to understand, and I knew he was talking about me. He was talking to her, but was talking about cutting my face off and skinning me. Then he shouted, "That uniform doesn't make you, though." And at that point I just got too sketched out and went inside to finish my shift. The rest of the night was unsettling too, because I kept hearing voices outside and tapping on the walls and doors, and I knew it was them. Luckily they couldn't get inside without a keycard though, and when my shift ended, I went to my car and there was a sticky note that read, "Next time you won't be so lucky," with a crosshairs symbol next to the words. Needless to say, I am never returning to that library to do an overnight shift again. When I was around 15 years old, I was very active on many Facebook art groups, and I got to meet many people online who were often my age, so I ended up making lots of friends. These friends were never from my city though, not even my own country, so when I finally found someone from my city, I kind of got excited. This dude told me he was my age, and like the dumb kid I was, I believed him. We talked for about 2 months, and he seemed pretty chilled, at least until he started to ask for personal information and pictures of me. And let me tell you, I may be an idiot, but I'm not stupid, and I never sent anything. Now my Facebook profile didn't have any photos on it, but sadly my mum's did, and I tend to stand out because I'm very tall and have quite distinct features. Now before continuing, I want to address the title of the story, Why Ronald McDonald? Well, he was very, very obsessed with Ronald McDonald. He had pictures of him everywhere and would share mostly old photos of the suit, but at the time I thought it was just a joke or a weird aesthetic. And since I've always loved creepy photos, I didn't think much of it. At least until he started to show his clear devotion to the clown. He would say things like, Donald was his hero, and wanted to meet him. Something that wasn't probable, since we don't have McDonald's in my country. In his mission to get to know me, he asked if I was interested in anyone, and I said no. He then proceeded to ask me if I wanted to be his girlfriend. I of course said no, but he kept insisting, so I lied and said I wasn't interested in anyone, because I already had a girlfriend. I'm bi and I was very open about it online at the time. Then he quickly switched from, be my girlfriend, to, you're a sinner, and that's when I knew this dude was religious and homophobic as hell. He even asked me if my dad or any men had done something to me for me to like girls more. At that point it was time to say goodbye and block him everywhere I could. He tried to contact me from different accounts, but the way he writes is very distinctive, so I blocked them too. From then on he would be everywhere. I would join a group for artists only, and he would pop out of nowhere, and he didn't even do art, and if I left the group he would leave too. I would go to conventions with my cousin and he would be there. I knew what he looked like because he'd sent me pictures. I tried to pass it as a weird coincidence, but he didn't even like anime, or anything about the convention, so it was really weird. This went on for a good couple of years, and I somehow managed to avoid a physical encounter every time. I'm guessing he could keep track on me, because I was, and still are, very active on my city's art community. I never post about personal stuff or pictures of my face, but at times I have said something like, going to X place at X time, and then he would be there. Fast forward a few years where I'm attending an art-related class, and there is this one really weird dude as my classmate. I say he's weird because he would sit with me and my friend, and he would ask us not safe for work questions, like we were a couple. We were both minors and he was 23, so we tried to keep our distance. One day the McDonald guy came into the building. I obviously fast walked to the other side, but apparently he was looking for some other dude, and of course they were friends. It seemed that the weird dude would talk about me and my friend with the McDonald guy, who clearly knew who I was and was still trying to get to me. The classes always ended quite late, and I had to wait for my mum to pick me up. Now I'm generally a very calm and strong person, so I didn't fear being robbed, because I had already been in that situation and knew how to deal with it. But the knowledge of the McDonald guy knowing where I was 3 days of the week and late at night gave me chills.